Greetings to you today from Pastor Dan, Fairport Christian Fellowship. Grace and peace be multiplied to you today. We are making our way through the Psalms and we only have 148 more to go. We're going to do Psalm 3 today. I'm excited to bring it to you, so let's just jump right in. This Psalm 3 is one that is written by David. It actually goes with Psalm 4. Psalm 3 is called a morning psalm, something that you would read in the morning, because David is going to say in verse 5 that I lay down and slept, I awoke, and the Lord sustained me. So it's a morning psalm as you go into Psalm 4. It's an evening psalm before you go to bed, so maybe you want to read them together, but we're going to do Psalm 3 today. 3 times in this psalm, there's just 8 verses. 3 times in the psalm, there's a word called Selah, and it is there for you to pause and to reflect. In the musical terms, it would be bringing the music to a crescendo, and it would be a pause to reflect. Or as some people would say, it's for you to sit back and think about what has been said. So what do you think about that? And so we're going to see that 3 times in this psalm. Let me read it through once for the whole 8 verses, and then we'll get into it. It says, a psalm of David when he fled from Absalom his son. Lord, how they have increased who trouble me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. Selah. What do you think about that? But you, O Lord, are a shield for me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill. Selah. I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves around me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you have struck all my enemies on the cheekbone. You have broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing is upon your people. Selah. There's the third one. So what do you think about that? Like I said, a morning psalm. And I'm going to give you a little bit of historical background on this because it starts right out that way. It says, a psalm of David when he fled from Absalom, his son. I'm not sure if you remember that account. It would do good for us to rehearse what happened so that we can get the sense of what David was feeling when he wrote this song. The historical setting is that he wrote this as he fled from Absalom, his son. You see, it all started with David back with his sin with Bathsheba, and when he tried to cover that up. Do you remember that? And what happened there, and how he had taken Bathsheba's husband and put him on the front lines and had him murdered, really. And so David had sinned against the Lord, and in the sight of the Lord, he sinned with Bathsheba, another man's wife, and then he went and had that man killed when they found out that Bathsheba was pregnant. So he was trying to hide his sin, and he didn't do well in those times when he was trying to hide. And that's the way it is. There's guilt and all kinds of things. But that's where this one began. See, David had sinned, a great sin, murder and adultery. And, in the Jewish law, those are punishable by death. There is no sacrifice to be made. But David was forgiven. Do you remember that Nathan, he came to David and he confronted David with his sin. And David ended up repenting. And guess what? God forgave him, and that's just a picture of what we can experience when we fail. God is gracious and merciful, but he wants us to come to him and confess. And that's what David had done, but as a result, God said in that chapter, the sword would never depart from his house, and that God would raise up adversity against David in his own house, and that he would take his wives and give them to his neighbor in front of everyone. God would take David's wives and give them to his neighbor. He didn't realize it was going to be his son. But that's what happened. See, there was going to be consequences for David's sin. That's where it all began. And so that was what's going to happen from now on. You're going to have, and notice that it said, in his own house. You know, David was a great and awesome king. He was a wonderful, wonderful psalm writer, but he wasn't a very good father. I think the beginning of that was that he had too many wives. And really, the Bible says you should have just one. One should be enough. And but he had wives and concubines. And as a result of that, he had many children that were half brothers and half sisters. One of his sons, Amnon, had a crush on his half sister Tamar. He was so smitten with her that he was heartsick. He thought it was love. That's not love. Well, Tamar's brother was Absalom. Okay, Amnon ended up raping Tamar, and it wasn't true love because he then discarded her. So with the same kind of emotion he felt love for her, he went the other direction and he just discarded her. And what happened was David didn't do anything about it. You know, as father, he should have done something. There should have been some kind of punishment or making it right. But because of David's sin, he probably felt that he was not worthy to be able to speak to anybody else about their sin. Well, Absalom, Tamar's brother, did not like it, and that David did nothing. So he took matters into his own hands and he murdered his brother Amnon. And after that, Absalom fled and went to a place called Jeshurun, and he was there for 3 years. After 3 years, Absalom was allowed to return to his house in Jerusalem, but he was not allowed to see David. David did not want to see him. So you can see how this is beginning to brood in the house, in the household, in the family, and something's going to come of it. We see that David could not rule his own house well, possibly because of his own sin that he had within him, the guilt that he may have been feeling, and that he could not actually feel like he could speak to anybody about their sin. Well, then Absalom began to turn the hearts of men to himself, and he went to Hebron to establish himself as king. He even persuaded Ahithophel, David's close friend and counselor, to take sides with him. The conspiracy grew strong and continually increased in number. He was winning people over to himself, saying all kinds of things about David. And he even, like I said, persuaded Ahithophel. Who is Ahithophel? He was a close friend of David, and he was a good counselor. And Absalom was able to persuade him to come over to his side. Why do you think that Ahithophel would turn on David? Well, if you really study it and look into it, you will find out that Ahithophel is the grandfather of Bathsheba. And he did not like what David had done and thought that maybe, he should have been punished for it. And he held on to that. And he could not bring himself to forgive David for having his grandson-in-law murdered and what he had done to Bathsheba. So he was holding on to something. God could forgive David, but men, they have a tough time. Just remember that. Well, when word got back to David that this was going on, that Absalom was conspiring against him and many people were siding with him, he did not want the city of Jerusalem to experience any kind of bloodshed, so he ran He and his household left Jerusalem, but he left 10 of his concubines to keep the house. That's what the Bible says. He did have with him his 600 mighty men, and there were others with him. And you can read all about this in 2 Samuel 14, 15, all through that, and see it for yourself. It says in 2 Samuel 15:30, so David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and he wept as he went up. And he had his head covered and went barefoot, and all the people who were with him covered their heads and went up weeping as they went. So you get the scene here. As he's going up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives. It just kind of reminds me of Jesus, that he did the same thing in the Mount of Olives. He wept over the city of Jerusalem. Well, this king here, King David, he was weeping also, and all the people that were with him. He had his head covered. I suppose that if he had a hoodie, he would have the hoodie up right over his head, and he was weeping, and all the people that were with him, they were weeping also. And that's the scenario there as he's leaving Jerusalem. And as he went at the top of the ridge, a man named Shimei, from the house of Saul. That's important. Shimei is from the house of Saul. Saul ended up being David's enemy. And this man was from that house, so he was holding on to things too. And he could see that, hey, this is coming around to get you now, David. So he was up at the top of this ridge, and he was throwing stones down at David and the others that were with him, and he was cursing David. And one of David's mighty men, he offered, hey, do you want me to go remove this man's head from his shoulders? I wonder if I would have done that. I wonder if I would have said yes. Well, David said no. He was deeply affected by this. His own son is conspiring against him, and he, I believe, is blaming himself and looking back and seeing. Did you ever have any regrets in your life? I think David looked back at the sin with Bathsheba and greatly regretted it, but it is what it is. It happened, and now he's suffering the consequences. And so he's basically saying, he said, no, don't remove it. It may be that God sent this man to curse me. It may be that God will look upon my affliction and repay me with good for his cursing. The Bible says that we should return blessing for a cursing. Well, I think David learned a little bit about that, and he's feeling it himself. He's feeling the weight of his sin and the consequences of it. So we see from the very first verse, the historical background. This is where it's brought to. So he's left Jerusalem, and he writes this morning psalm. So let's go on. It says, a psalm of David when he's fled from Absalom, his son. Lord, how they have increased who trouble me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. Selah. What do you think about that? So David writes that down. As I said, he's feeling the weight of his sin, and he can feel the weight of this conspiracy and his own sin. And it seems like many, he says, everybody is against me. Thousands and thousands are seeking David's life at this time. It says many twice. Many are rising up against him, and many are saying, God's not going to help him. That's what people are thinking. God is not going to help. And so that I believe that he's feeling the weight of all of that, and he's seeing what is brought to. The sin that he started, well, it's gone. It's producing fruit, and it's come home to roost. And the people know that, they feel that, and there's a conspiracy, and he's just feeling that many are against him. But I love when a verse starts with the word but. But you, O Lord, are the shield for me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill. Selah. What do you think about that? Oh, isn't that great? You, O Lord, you are my shield. You're the one who can protect me. You know, God would say that to Abraham in Genesis. He would say to him, I am your shield and your exceeding great reward. I believe he said that right after Abraham had come back from fighting against 5 kings and rescuing his nephew Lot and the king of Sodom and all the people of Sodom. And he might have been thinking, oh boy, now they're going to come after me. There's going to be a conspiracy. But the Lord said to him, I am your shield and your exceeding great reward. Proverbs 2 also tells us he is a shield to those who walk uprightly. So we can take that to heart ourselves. God is our shield. What does that mean? He will protect us. Part of the Christian's armor in Ephesians chapter 6 is the shield of faith with which we can extinguish the fiery darts of the devil. So he's a shield for us. And I just wanted to read to you from the Psalm 91. I wanted to read to you 3 different sections. Of course, I would encourage you to read the whole thing, put it together, dwell on it a little while, meditate on it, think about it. It's a great psalm. Psalm 91 verses 1 and 2. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him will I trust. Man, what a verse. The Lord is our shield. He's our fortress. He's our refuge. He's our hiding place. We need to dwell within him and trust in him. We can, think that we can trust in an army. We can trust in our military. We can trust in having all kinds of weapons. We can trust in, authorities around us. I believe that we really need to trust in the Lord first and foremost, and we need to dwell with him, abide under the shadow of the Almighty. He is the Most High God. And if God is for us, who can be against us? On in Psalm 91 verse 4, it says, he shall cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. His truth will be our shield and buckler. We'll take refuge under his wings. Doesn't that make you feel good? He's got us. And David senses this as he's writing this psalm. As many are rising up against him, he says and makes this declaration, you're my shield. You're my shield, and you'll protect me. And he'll cover you with his feathers. Under his wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. On in verses 5 and 6 it says, you shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, the missiles. And there's missiles flying everywhere these days. North Korea just tested a missile. See how far it can go and if it's going to be accurate. There's missiles flying all over the Middle East these days. We don't hear about it from our news, but if you're paying attention, you'll see. Well, you don't have to be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the missiles that fly by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness. Is there pestilence going on in our world today? Nor of the destruction that lays waste at noonday. Verses 9 and 10 of Psalm 91, because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. No plague coming near your dwelling. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so we need to trust the Lord that he is our shield, he is our protector, and we need to have faith that he will do such a thing, that he has us in the palm of his hand and he will take care of us. and he'll bring us safely home. He is our God. And David was feeling that. Imagine that. I mean, it's a great psalm and it's a great thought to think of when everything is safe and secure and you're in that safe and secure place. You know, outside there's a snowstorm and you've got a nice crackling fire in the fireplace. You know, that feels safe and secure. It's great to be able to sing that. But how about when everybody in the world is chasing you? You've been chased out of your home. You're living in the wilderness, and and what's coming down is a conspiracy, and it may be that it's because of your own sin. I like Romans 8:31. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? If God is for you, and he is for you, who can be against you? Tell me who? Who? You know, I think about David, and before he was king, Saul, his enemy, looked for David every single day, and he couldn't find him. Why is that? I mean, it seemed like everybody else could find him, but Saul could not find him. Well, it's because the Lord was David's shield and was hiding him. Do you remember the time when Saul was chasing David around a mountain? David and his army, his 600 men were on one side of the mountain. David was on the other side, and they were closing up, and they're chasing David, and they're getting closer and closer. What happened? Well, a messenger came to Saul. He receives word that the Philistines are coming. He had to give up the chase. The Lord knows what to do. He is our shield. But let's go on in verses 5 and 6. I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. Wow. Man, did you ever feel like this? Picture yourself where David is and what's going on in his emotions. But it says here, I laid down and slept. And then I woke up. The Lord sustained me. It's a picture that thousands of people looking for David. Many are those who have risen up against me. And yet David could lay down and sleep. And it reminds me of Peter in the jail cell. You know, after James was killed. And Herod threw Peter into jail. It says that Peter slept. You know, he thought, well, maybe he was thinking back, I'm not going to get my head cut off. Jesus said I'd be crucified, so it's not going to happen. I don't know. Whatever it was, Peter slept. And he wants us to be able to sleep in the midst of these kinds of things. Pandemics, whatever. Can you sleep? Are you worried? Man, you need to dwell under the shadow of the Most High God. Psalm 27, verse 1, another psalm of David. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? What a statement. Who is the light? Who is your light? Who's your salvation? Who is the strength of your life? Why are you afraid? Why should we be afraid? David says and makes this declaration, I will not be afraid. Whom shall I be afraid of? God is for me. And again, this whole Psalm 27, you should read the whole thing. It's like 14 verses. Pretty easy, but I'm just picking out a few here. Verse 3 of Psalm 27, though an army may encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war may rise against me, in this will I be confident. You see, it said, I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. And in Psalm 27, he says, an army can encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war may rise up against me, in this I will be confident. Well, let's go on. It says in verses 7 and 8, we'll finish this psalm. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you have struck all my enemies on the cheekbone. You have broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing is upon your people. Selah. What do you think about that? the Lord says, save me. Oh, Lord, save me. He hears the cry. God hears your cry. And the Lord will strike all the enemies. There'll be a day when all the enemies of the Lord will be cast down in front of him. Our salvation, it belongs to the Lord. He will save us. And then this says that your blessing is upon your people. Now think about that. Psalm 27 again, verse 5, we'll finish with this. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret place of his tabernacle he shall hide me. He shall set me high upon a rock. In a time of trouble. David is definitely in a time of trouble here. He's been troubled and his own son is coming after him, but he has experienced many troubles before and he has learned to trust the Lord in every one of them. And we need to take this verse to heart too. In the time of trouble, do we have any troubles coming? Is there a time of trouble? Is there a time of tribulation? What does it say? He shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret place of his tabernacle, he shall hide me. He shall set me high upon a rock. You know, I guess you can take that many different ways. But for me, there's just a little clue of a rapture there. You know, he can hide you in this world if he wants to, but he can also take you out of it. And in the secret place of his tabernacle, I like to think that's heaven. It says he shall set me high upon a rock. The rock is Jesus, and I do believe that he will hide us from trouble. So maybe we just need to take heart today and be like David and be able to say, you, O Lord, are the shield about me. You're the glory and the lifter of my head. God bless you all today.